Today, I'm to talk about digital inequality, its impact in the education of children, and how COVID has revealed as well as exacerbated this issue during the lockdowns and restrictions. Um, Before starting on, I want to unpack this term digital inequality. Digital inequality refers to differential access to digital resources like computers, laptops, mobile phones, internet, etc., in various socio-economic conditions that leads to differential participation of an individual in the society. Um, Traditionally, we used to talk a lot about digital divide in the ICT literature, information communication and technology literature. It basically means the gap between the people who have access to technology and who did not have access to technology. It rather focused on the people's varying willingness to adopt the technology. But it failed to acknowledge and incorporate the fact that the individuals uh, are embedded in different socio-economic systems that um, contributes towards the access acquisition and of the digital technology and the development of digital skills as well. Now let's move on to our main topic, digital inequality and education. During the COVID-19, there were severe lockdown measures and restrictions that were regulated worldwide. In Nepal, the government of Nepal imposed a lockdown on March 2020. So, the school closing during COVID 19 prompted massive adoption of online education. However, in developing countries like Nepal, vulnerable students who did not have access to digital resources and internet were further disadvantaged. The digital divide among the students no longer remained an issue of whether or not a student will be able to complete their homeworks or assignments, submit their projects, or expand their learning horizon, but it became a matter of if a child could access online classes and education if they did not have access to internet and digital resources. The students who did not have access to digital resources and internet missed their online classes. So it resulted in low attendance or no attendance of of students in these online learnings and classes. So the students who had no attendance or who had very low attendance fell behind in their schoolwork and made them more likely to fall behind academically. So if they fell behind, they had fewer opportunities to make up for their lost lessons, for their lost educational opportunities. Such students may or may not be able to catch up with their missed opportunities, learning opportunities. Some of them might give up on catching up with the lost work. As a matter of fact, a lot of students have already dropped out of the school system during and after the pandemic. According to the reports, the number of students who are already out of the school system during the COVID-19 pandemic was 1.5 billion. It's a huge, staggering number. Where did 1.5 billion children go? I recently conducted a study on digital inequality and education through a teacher's perspective. And the study was mainly focused in the schools in rural parts of the country. It kind of explored the levels of digital inequality that the students faced and the impacts of the digital inequality in their education. And my findings of the study, they kind of reveal that the socio-economic conditions of the students from where they belong, for instance, like the income of their household, their age, their gender, the language that they speak in or are comfortable with, the geographical location of their whereabouts, they had a direct relationship with the digital inequality that they faced. Let's talk about income a little bit. So, all the participants in the study agreed to the fact that the students from extremely low income families could not afford technological apparatus devices that were required for online classes during the pandemic. Although some households were able to afford um, bare minimum smartphones, according to the study, according to the participants, the recurring cost of having to buy the recharge cards to constantly upgrade and update the access was a huge family burden for them. The household income also determined the inequality of the technical devices owned by the family. So poor households with low incomes could only afford second-hand smartphones, but few households with a relatively higher income, they could have access to desktops and laptops and Wi-Fi connections. Although technically, on paper, both of these students have access to internet and have access to technology, but then there is inequality in the level of access that they have. The students who have access to higher specifications are able to browse the internet faster. They are able to attend uninterrupted online classes and have access to other learning portals, while the students who do not have access to laptops or desktop and were barely accessing the online classes through their smartphones, they did not have access to all those advanced and sophisticated technologies. It also depended on the geographical location of the where the students were situated in. So the study revealed that the place the study revealed that if the student if they lived in the cities or towns, then they had greater access, they had more efficient and effective access to internet and technological devices, whereas if they lived in the rural outskirts of the country or remote parts of the country, then their access was inferior. So in one of these studies, one of the schools was from a remote village in Dolpo, and they had no internet access at all. So it depends on the socio-economic dynamics of the location here. So with higher population density in a given area and higher income, particularly demonstrated in urban-centric communities, the students had more access. They had more better 3G, 4G coverage sites. They had more stable fixed internet. The students, the individuals who lived in these privileged locations, they could access the sources of information first. And with their higher level of incomes, they could afford to access them while they were new. So on the other hand, the people who were disadvantaged in accessing this knowledge and information due to their lower socio-economic status and disadvantaged geographical location. So these were not the privileged social locations where you have access to fixed internet, where you have access to high income jobs. Let's move on to the next factor. I'm gonna kind of put it in one box here: gender and age. So the differential access to ICT based on gender and age indicated that the process of using the internet often replicate the existing social inequalities that we see in some communities. The findings showed that the female students had less access to internet, to digital resources, to smartphones than their male counterparts. The study also revealed that there was a common mindset among parents that providing access to the daughters, to the girl students, could do harm to them. It could result in the development of, for instance, one of the participants said, a romantic relationship with the other boy and could end up in an elopement. While some of the cases of elopement have happened and the exact reason behind it was not clear, but the community believed that the internet was to blame. Further, the gender roles defined and expected in some communities, in the families, also caused lower level of access because they didn't have time to access the internet, to access the phone, to access the laptop at their own discretion because they were so burdened with other household works. Further, the students who were younger and had to depend on their siblings, elder siblings and parents to access their the internet or the phone were more disadvantaged. From the study, it also showed that if there was one resource and then there were two children in the house, the older children who was in a higher grade were always prioritized, the senior students were always prioritized than junior students. Very interesting, another finding of a social dynamic is the language. I found that the familiarity of the language that is dominant in the web space influenced the value derived that could be accessed from the internet. For someone who does not speak that language, the value that could be derived from the internet and from the resources is way less. In my study, many of the students did not speak English properly. Some of them did. For some of them, their native language was not Nepali either. They spoke different native languages. So the students who could not read, write, or understand the languages that were dominant in this web space, they could not benefit from the internet even if they had access. They missed out on this opportunity to develop their digital skills and competencies through online platforms. One of the participants mentioned an incident where he wanted the student to unmute themselves to speak up, but they couldn't simply do it because they couldn't understand the language used in the Zoom platform, which is English. So from an intersectional perspective, the people who were not familiar with the dominant language of the internet and lived in underprivileged remote locations with minimal access to the internet faced more barriers to access learning opportunities. However, one more thing added to that is just having access to digital technology is not enough. Echoing the last example, digital skills are also equally important. The students require the digital skills and competencies to navigate through the online system. They need a certain level of information skills to search for information, communication skills to communicate their knowledge to their teachers or to their peers, or certain other skills that are required to, for instance, like submit online assignments, give exams, online exams or quizzes, etc. So in conclusion, my study revealed that the digital inequality and education have sort of like cause and effect relationship. If the students did not possess the digital skills, they could not access education through online classes, and if they could not attend the online classes, they could not access opportunities to develop the digital skills. On top of that, not having access or digital skills led to reduced learning opportunities for these children. That means they are falling behind academically, and the number that is 1.5 billion right now who have already dropped out of the school system may increase further. You may ask, what's the solution to this problem? There are so many things to be done. How do we stop our students from dropping out of the school system altogether? I believe a good point to start is shifting our program's focus from digital divide to digital inequality, and really trying to understand the impact of socioeconomic backgrounds on digital inequality and how digital inequality contributes to reduced learning opportunity for students. Well, it's a feedback loop. The reduced income opportunities, reduced educational opportunity also contributes to reduced income opportunity, and henceforth it's a feedback loop. It's almost a cycle. So we have to treat this issue very seriously because it has become very critical, especially during the time of COVID. We've already seen it. It is a really critical matter for our students, and all of us have to come in together to solve this. Development practitioners, not-for-profits, school management systems, families, parents, students, governments, all of us have to come together to help our children derive the best education that they could. Thank you.